Rise of the European Emperor by Taishan Laonyo.
Chapter 551 Returning to the Court. In fact, Princess Margaret didn't know that her classmate Marin, who was thinking about it, had been thinking about things in England for a long time. At present, the war in Germany has come to an end, and Marin is planning to go to England. However, he needs a suitable excuse to send troops. He has not yet confessed to Edward that he is the Edison, the boss of the North Sea Chamber of Commerce, and he is also thinking about how to confess to Edward. Only when the words are spoken can we cooperate. But the problem is that he can't be too proactive. The main person is not anxious. Why are you, an outsider, anxious? Therefore, Marin is also thinking about how to propose to help Edward fight Henry VII. It can be said that this letter from Princess Margaret actually gave Marin a step down. If Edward is willing to take the initiative to invite him to send troops, it would be great. In this way, his ambitions for England can be fully covered up. If he is too proactive, maybe Edward will doubt his motives. Of course, that is a matter for the future. At present, Marin is preparing to withdraw his troops and return to the court. The imperial meeting in Worms is over. Marin respectfully sent off his father-in-law who came from afar to help him, and then visited a group of princes before ending his trip to Worms. Next, Marin will take 10,000 troops to Hamburg to join other troops. Then, after the three parties divide the interests, they will go back to their own homes and find their own mothers. In fact, the three families have already agreed on the division of interests because the war was basically fought by Marin's army, the land ceded to Marin. The property and compensation obtained will be divided equally among the three families. Before, Marin had robbed more than 2 million golden gold coins in Wittenberg, which had been transported to Hamburg and Lübeck for auction. Together with the 2.5 million gold coins that the other party needed to compensate in the later agreement, the total income was about 4.5 million gold coins. If the three families divide it equally, each family will get about 1.5 million. However, Marin privately reduced the compensation of the electorate of Brandenburg by 500,000 gold coins, and the 1 million gold coins that the electorate of Saxony needed to pay were also transferred by Marin to George, Duke of Saxony, for the purchase of West Frisia. So, in the end, Marin had already used up his share. In other words, the remaining property worth more than 2 million golden gold coins, as well as the 500,000 gold coins each compensated by Denmark and Brandenburg, had nothing to do with him. After arriving in Hamburg, the three parties divided the interests. The property worth more than 2 million golden gold coins was divided equally between Hamburg and Lübeck. As for the compensation, Lübeck was responsible for collecting the 500,000 gold coins from Denmark. The compensation of the electorate of Brandenburg, which was 500,000 gold coins, was collected by Hamburg. As for Marin, obtaining so much land was already the biggest gain. Moreover, when he carried out the demolition-style looting of Wittenberg, he also privately hid gold and silver coins and gold and silver jewelry worth millions of gold coins, and his purse was also very rich. Therefore, he had nothing to do with the subsequent division of property, and he didn't care too much. However, Marin was a little troubled about the rewards for his soldiers. Originally, Marin planned to reward the entire army with the property worth 400,000 golden gold coins looted from Wittenberg. However, now Marin didn't get any property after the division meeting. Therefore, Marin now needs to have a headache about what to reward the soldiers. Marin was reluctant to use the cash and gold and silver jewelry he had robbed to reward the soldiers. Moreover, he felt that this loophole could not be opened. Why? If the soldiers are used to the rewards of a large amount of gold and silver coins, if the monarch is short of money one day and has no cash to reward the soldiers, will it cause adverse effects and even shake the morale of the army? Therefore, Marin's point of view is not that he can't afford cash, but that he can't open this loophole. If the soldiers develop the bad habit of not fighting without cash, it will be difficult to manage the army in the future. Therefore, Marin's rewards are generally distributed in batches after the war, and generally not in cash, but converted into property and land as much as possible. But this problem was quickly solved by the quartermaster who came to report his work. How was it solved? It turned out that the quartermaster came to report to Marin and pointed out that there were a large number of captured weapons and armor piled up in the warehouse. Before, although Marin sold 2,000 sets of full-body plate armor, 3,000 sets of breastplate armor and 10,000 spears to Emperor Maximilian I, it was a minority after all. You know, Marin's army seized weapons and armor for 50,000 troops. And the knights' horses. But for some reason, when the three families divided the property this time, Lübeck and Hamburg did not mention these weapons, armor and horses, and did not ask to participate in the division of horses and weapons and armor. In fact, as allies, Lübeck and Hamburg were also shocked by the powerful combat effectiveness shown by Marin. Therefore, when dividing the property, Lübeck and Hamburg tacitly did not mention the war horses and weapons and armor, and only discussed the visible property. After all, the two families may need to rely on Marin for safety in the future. Moreover, this war was basically all contributed by Marin, and they can share so much money, which is also a bargain. If they want to share a share of war horses and weapons and armor, it is easy to annoy Marin, and it will not be worth the loss. Since Lübeck and Hamburg did not mention the captured war horses and weapons and armor, Marin was naturally not polite. There were a lot of horses seized this time, more than 20,000. Among them, there were more than 7,000 war horses used by knights to charge. In addition, there were more than 13,000 draft horses used for transfers and pulling goods. There were so many horses that Marin was a little worried. It just so happens that he needs to reward his men, and using war horses and weapons and armor as rewards seems to be the best. Anyway, Marin originally planned to cash in those war horses and weapons and armor. However, because the quantity is too large and the weapons and armor are not new, if you want to sell them, you will inevitably have to sell them at a discount. But now, if you use them to reward soldiers, you don't have to discount them, but calculate them according to their market prices. For example, a set of plate armor sells for 50 gold coins in the market. If Marin concentrates on dealing with these second-hand weapons and armor, maybe he can only sell them for 20 or 30 gold coins per set. However, when it is used to reward meritorious soldiers, it can be calculated according to its market price. Therefore, if Marin gives those second-hand weapons and armor as rewards to meritorious soldiers, he can save a lot of money. As for those war horses, Marin decided to give most of them to those meritorious officers and let them take them back to raise. Usually, they are also used as daily transportation for officers. Then, Marin only left a group of excellent mares and placed them in the breeding center to cultivate excellent offspring. As for the stallions, give them to the officers to raise. You know, European native war horses often lack feed, and the cost of raising them is amazing. Rewarding most of the war horses to meritorious officers can also be regarded as sharing the cost of raising horses. Moreover, rewarding war horses looks very high-end and classy, and the people who are rewarded are grateful. But in fact, they raise those war horses for Marin. Because, when fighting, they have to pull out the war horses that they usually raise to fight for Marin. Therefore, Marin thinks he is too talented. With a small trick, the cost of raising horses is passed on to his officers. You know, the amount of fine feed consumed by 7,000 war horses every day is very scary. It is all borne by Marin himself, which is very expensive. And those draft horses are not used for daily feeding. Moreover, those draft horses can also be used to pull carts and plow fields, and have a wide range of uses. There are also people who buy them in the civilian market. What's more, Marin plans to vigorously develop the Jutland Peninsula, and he needs a large number of draft horses. Therefore, Marin can eat all these draft horses by himself. Of course, although these war horses and second-hand weapons and armor are also rewards, they are not all. When rewarding merits, a large amount of land must be rewarded. And those war horses and weapons and armor can only be regarded as the addition of rewards, instead of property rewards. However, the calculation of military merits is very troublesome. In particular, the calculation of the military merits of 40,000 troops is even more troublesome. It takes a long time to count all the military merits. Therefore, before the reward, everyone can only go back to their own homes, and find their own mothers. After the military merits are counted, a formal ceremony will be held to publicly award titles and land, as well as financial rewards. Therefore, after the division of the spoils in Hamburg, Marin naturally planned to go back. Of course, before returning, he still needed to wait for the troops stationed in Wittenberg and Berlin to join him in Hamburg. Only after all the troops arrived could he officially return to the capital. Chapter 552, Raising the Boss's Title. In September, Schwartz and Wolf Esperand led the armies stationed in Wittenberg and Berlin respectively to Hamburg and joined Marin. Then, Marin returned to the court with his army. Before leaving, Marin sent away Joachim I, the Elector of Brandenburg, who had been a hostage for a long time, and released some officers of the Electorate of Brandenburg as Joachim I's entourage. In order to make the officers of the Electorate of Brandenburg look decent, Marin even returned some weapons and equipment for free. Otherwise, if Marin did not send some weapons and equipment, Joachim I would probably have to return home with a group of people sadly. Moreover, Marin also gave Joachim I and his entourage horses to ride. Of course, they were all draft horses. The price of war horses was high, so Marin would not return them. In this way, Joachim I and hundreds of his officers rode on draft horses and hurried back to the Electorate of Brandenburg in a miserable way. As for most of the captured soldiers of the Electorate of Brandenburg and the Electorate of Saxony, according to the treaty, they had to wait until the other party paid the indemnity before they could be released. The same was true for the prisoners of war of the Electorate of Saxony, although the indemnity of the Electorate of Saxony was transferred to the Duchy of Saxony. However, Marin still insisted on keeping the captured Saxon soldiers to dig a canal for him for a year before sending them back. Of course, officers and the like must be sent back first. Because these officers are all from noble families, and they may not be able to do hard labor to dig canals. Perhaps these people will even do more harm than good. In addition, it is indeed a bad rule to let nobles dig canals as hard labor, which is easy to cause dissatisfaction among other nobles. Of course, Marin still left those ordinary knights to dig canals. Only barons and heirs of baronial families are eligible for early release. Moreover, those who came from knight families were physically strong and powerful, and they were good at digging canals. In addition to these captured regular army soldiers, Marin had no intention of returning those captured civilians. He even asked the two countries to send the families of those strong men over. And this was also the condition for Marin to reduce the ransom of hundreds of thousands of gold coins for the two countries. Otherwise, if it was not reduced, each family would have to pay a ransom of hundreds of thousands of gold coins. In Denmark, Marin mainly released those nobles and the original tens of thousands of veterans so that they would have the capital to resist Sweden's annexation. As for the nearly 20,000 captured new troops, except for the noble officers, they were all pulled to the southern part of the Munster area to dig canals. With so many strong men helping to dig the canal, Marin believed that the canal would be dug soon. At that time, East Frisia will be able to contact the Ruhr area where his hometown Bochum is located by water. Then, Marin will take over the Ruhr area, and basically, the core territory will be established. As for other places, they can only make plans after the Protestant War begins. As far as the German region is concerned, Marin believes that the most essential region is the Ruhr area. With the Ruhr area, the Industrial Revolution can be carried out. Although it takes a long time, at least the resources are in their own hands first. In addition, potash mines are also very important. After all, potash is an extremely important fertilizer and a guarantee of a good harvest. Therefore, potash resources are the second strategic resource that Marin must master. Although the German region is small, the potash resources are very rich. In later generations, Germany, with only 350,000 square kilometers, ranks second to China in potash resources, but higher than the United States. Among them, an important potash-producing area in Germany is the Duchy of Lüneburg. The Harz Mountains in the south and the Hanover region are important potash-producing areas. In fact, many of the mineral salts in Lüneburg are potash salts. If it is KCl, it tastes almost the same as normal table salt and cannot be distinguished at all. And those bitter salts are mainly sulfate salts, which may be sodium sulfate, Glauber's salt, or potassium sulfate. It is difficult for ordinary people to distinguish, but Marin knows that using blue cobalt glass imported from Venice, a simple flame color reaction can be used to distinguish whether the mineral salt contains potassium. Through this method, Marin has allowed Kohler to take over several potash mines in the Harz Mountains in the name of an unknown chamber of commerce. In addition, there are also large-scale potash mines in the Archbishopric of Magdeburg. However, the potash mines in the Harz Mountains and Hanover belong to the Duchy of Lüneburg. And the Archbishopric of Magdeburg is not something that Marin can move. However, Marin knows that these two principalities were the first principalities to turn to Protestantism after Martin Luther launched the Reformation. At that time, Marin only needs to hold high the banner of maintaining Catholicism, and he can seize the Duchy of Lüneburg and the Archbishopric of Magdeburg openly. Anyway, the Duchy of Lüneburg is now Marin's neighbor, and it is very convenient to send troops to occupy it. The Archbishopric of Magdeburg is also close to the Duchy of Lüneburg, so it is very convenient to capture it. When returning home, Marin's army passed through the Oldenburg area. Now it is not called the earldom, because the Oldenburg family is already the ruler of the earldom of Iceland. In the city of Oldenburg, Marin met his eldest brother Adler, who was holding on here. After several years of experience, Adler is no longer the ignorant boy. When he saw his younger brother Marin, Adler was also much more restrained, and he actually saluted Marin first. Sister-in-law Liv was also there. Liv was specially sent by the old Hoffman couple to accompany the eldest brother. Because Adler still has only Margaret as a daughter, and has no male heir yet. Therefore, sister-in-law Liv was ordered to come to cooperate with Adler to make a little man. Marin didn't notice it before, but this time he saw it clearly. Liv's belly was bulging. Obviously, this is a successful little man. Sister-in-law Liv is still so fierce. If she wasn't pregnant, she might wear plate armor and compete with her eldest brother. Seeing Marin wearing a set of clothes that only a Grand Duke could wear, she was outspoken and envious. "Oh, Marin, you are a Grand Duke, several levels higher than Adler." The speaker was unintentional, but the listener was interested. Marin reacted all of a sudden. It was time to mention the title to the boss. Before, Marin himself was only an East Frisian count. If he wanted to reward his subordinates, the Viscount was already the top, and he couldn't reward a count as well. Moreover, the title of Viscount was not popular in the German region and was very rare. It only appeared in the Netherlands and Lombardy in northern Italy, and the scope of power generally did not exceed a castle and its surroundings. Of course, there were no formal Viscounts and Viscounts in the imperial title system. But in Marin's Grand Duchy of the North Sea, Marin could establish a formal Viscount's territory. The reason for establishing the Viscount was to follow the convention and imitate the three-level system of barons to raise the three levels of Viscount, Deputy Viscount and Viscount, just to facilitate the reward of meritorious soldiers under his command. Otherwise, if his subordinates have already reached the rank of baron, they can't jump up to the rank of count, right? Therefore, it would be best to make a Viscount as a transition. For example, after the war, Schwarz, who is the highest-ranking official baron of the third-level baron, should be promoted according to his merits. If he is not conscious of this title, should he be promoted to count? That's a big gap. Therefore, it is more appropriate to be promoted to Viscount. But his eldest brother Adler is quite different. As the eldest son and the original first-in-line heir, according to European traditional practice, even if the Hoffman family inherits the count title of the Bloch family, Adler should be given priority. Although Marin succeeded in making Adler willingly give up his inheritance rights, he cannot treat him unfairly. Otherwise, he will be blamed. Just like Liu Xiu, the founding emperor of the Eastern Han dynasty, who abolished his eldest son Liu Zhang's position as crown prince without any fault, and treated him with special favor, allowing him to be a vassal king, but used the emperor's ceremonial guards, because this should have belonged to him. Although Adler did not contribute much to Marin becoming an earl, his rank was there. As long as Marin claimed that he inherited East Frisia from his mother, he could not avoid Adler. He was the eldest son. Therefore, Marin must give preferential treatment to Adler. For example, in this reward, meritorious officials like Schwarz must give way to Adler first. Moreover, Marin cannot be stingy. Schwarz will be made a Viscount, while Adler will be made a formal Viscount all at once. This is the power of bloodline. Chapter 553 Adler's Reward. Although it seems a bit unfair to do so, after all, Schwarz's contribution is much greater than Adler's. However, in Europe, bloodline is more important than military exploits. People with noble bloodlines are born to be officers. For example, the famous Duke of Wellington in the UK, who was born into aristocracy, spent a lot of money at a young age to buy the rank of colonel. Starting from colonel. The colonel is a big man at the same level as the commander of the regiment and the commander of the brigade, managing the work of thousands or even thousands of people. This is the power of bloodline, and the soldiers from ordinary people may not reach the level of lieutenant officers in their entire lives, and can only be small soldier leaders such as sergeants. This was in the 19th century, when Europe had begun to pay attention to the rights and interests of ordinary people. In the 16th century, this situation was even more serious. The children of great nobles, once they entered the army, were senior officers. And ordinary people may never become officers until they die. Why is Marin's army so combat effective and morale boosting? Because the soldiers understand that even if they are ordinary people, as long as they perform well, they have the opportunity to be promoted. If he worked for other nobles, he would never have such an opportunity, and in order to become a noble, many civilian soldiers dared to exchange their lives. Because of the difference in blood, Adler did not have to fight, but he could still receive the greatest credit and upgrade faster than Schwartz. Schwartz would not have any objection to this. Why? This is the tradition and custom in Europe. Therefore, Marin promoted Adler before promoting meritorious soldiers. Not only would there be no resistance, but he would also be praised for knowing the rules. Thinking of this, Marin said directly to Adler. Adler, you have arranged things here, and take time to go back to Auric with me. What for? Adler was a little puzzled. Promote the title. Marin said calmly. Again. I haven't fought many battles, I'm embarrassed. Adler said, rubbing his hands a little embarrassedly. Of course, he would not refuse. If you don't want a good thing that falls from the sky, you're a fool. Sister-in-law Liv immediately became interested and asked happily. What title? How much more fiefdom? Thinking that the granary might be filled with grain after the increase in fiefdom, she smiled so hard that her eyes narrowed into lines. Liv simply loved the feeling of lying on a pile of gold coins and counting money. Formal Viscount, the highest level among the 3 levels of Viscount. As for the fiefdom, double the cultivated land. Adler now has a fiefdom of 5,000 eugrams, of which 2,000 eugrams are cultivated land, which is 24,000 acres. If it is doubled, it will be 72,000 acres of cultivated land. Such a huge number of fiefdom rewards, if placed in ancient China, it is estimated that the ministers will be jealous to death. Why? Because the ancient Chinese rewards were generally only a few hundred acres or 1,000 acres of land. 72,000 acres of land, most court officials probably don't have that much land. You know, that is the Eastern Empire. The important ministers of such a large empire can't have so much cultivated land. Only those who wantonly annexed land in their later years like Su Jie could get as much as 240,000 mu of land, which shocked countless people. Anyway, with so much land, plus Marin's special fertilizers and advanced farming management techniques, the 72,000 mu of arable land can bring countless wealth to Adler every year. With the high grain prices in Europe, owning so many high-yield arable land is almost like owning a mountain of gold coins. Both Adler and his sister-in-law Liv were overwhelmed by the beautiful, money prospects. The couple's eyes were full of gold coins and satisfied expressions at this time. Seeing their expressions, Marin was also very satisfied. Why? Marin was worried that the Adlers would not be satisfied with the reward, for example, asking for an earl title or something. If Adler really wanted an earl title, Marin would not be able to refuse it. However, the title of earl is too high level. Even the earl of a vassal state is quite rare. Becoming an earl means entering the top aristocratic circle and being eligible to participate in the fight for the throne. Therefore, Marin is not very willing to grant top titles such as earls in his own Grand Duchy. When it comes to earls, there is basically no more titles. If you want to upgrade, there is no other way except rebellion. But Adler's existence is very sensitive. If Marin is alive, he will naturally not worry about his other thoughts. But if he unfortunately dies earlier than Adler, then it will be a big problem. At that time, Adler can declare to the outside world that he was forced to give up his inheritance rights. Then, jump out and compete with Caesar for the throne, that will be a big problem. Adler alone is naturally not a threat, but what if foreign forces intervene? Just like the matter of Edward of the York family. So, Marin has always paid attention to Adler's reaction. Adler is a poor student and has no talent for acting. Therefore, observing his reaction on the spot is the best choice. Fortunately, Adler is not dissatisfied with becoming a viscount. Even, he felt a little embarrassed and surprised. This made Marin very satisfied. This means that Adler does not have too much ambition. The same is true for sister-in-law Liv. This woman is a female version of Adler, a poor student, and aggressive, but she has no heart. Although some women have a small temper and sometimes care about interests, they are all for Adler. And this is just the duty of a wife, there is nothing to say. This couple are both relatively simple and rough people, and this kind of quality is exactly what Marin wants to see. If they are as thoughtful as their younger brother Albert, Marin would probably think about getting rid of them. However, when rewarding Adler with fiefdom, Marin also played a trick. He did not reward Adler with land near Adler's current fiefdom, Lair County, but allocated 2,000 uglums of arable land to Adler in the Oldenburg area and the Jutland Peninsula area. In this way, Adler's fiefdom was divided into 3 pieces and could not be concentrated together. In this way, even if Adler has his own power in the future, he will not be able to gather in one place. For example, the guards and entourage must be divided into 3 places far away. In this way, the force directly controlled by Adler is greatly reduced. In addition, Marin also gave Adler a big gift package, allowing him to retain the title of Baron of Leer. Moreover, he was allowed to transfer the title of Baron of Leer, including the barony and castle of Leer County, to his second son. Although Adler's eldest son has not been born yet, he is still young, and the couple is in good health, so there is a high possibility of giving birth to a second son. The new title that Marin intends to give Adler is Viscount of Oldenburg. His 2 new estates in the future, one will be near the city of Oldenburg, and the other will be on the Jutland Peninsula. Of course, this manor near the city of Oldenburg will be Adler's home fiefdom, and Marin will fund the construction of a castle for him. As for the original barony of Leer, Marin very much hopes that Adler will transfer it to his second son. In this way, Adler's fiefdom will be weakened. Anyone familiar with Chinese history may be able to tell the truth about this approach. Isn't this the enfeoffment order of the Han dynasty? If the title and territory of Baron Lyle are transferred to the second son, then Adler's eldest son will only have 2 fiefdoms in Oldenburg and Jutland Peninsula, and his strength will be reduced by 1/3, which will naturally be less threatening than before. Although Marin felt a little guilty for scheming against his not-so-smart cheap elder brother, he knew that a monarch should be ruthless. Of course, this refers to being cold-blooded in the heart. On the surface, however, one must appear to be affectionate and seem to value family and subjects very much, and the banner of morality must be waved a few times every day. If you can't do this, it's better to be a nobody as soon as possible, so that you can avoid the tragic end of being torn to pieces in the future. Chapter 554 is back. After 2 days of rest in Oldenburg, Marin took Adler directly back to Aurich. As for the eldest sister-in-law Liv, she was pregnant, so she did not follow the main force. Instead, she waited for the spring carriage to be ready, took the shock-absorbing spring carriage, and slowly rushed back to Aurich, so that she could find the 2 imperial doctors Morigen and Bartel for diagnosis, and then she would stay in Aurich to prepare for the birth. Along the way, Marin and Adler talked and laughed, and they looked like brothers and brothers. No. They looked like brothers and brothers. After all, Marin is the king now and Adler is the minister, so naturally Adler is respectful to Marin. Adler is almost 30 years old and much more sensible than before. He understands that his brother has left him far behind since he became the Baron of Texel. Moreover, everything he has now is given by his younger brother. Otherwise, with his ability, at most he can become a formal knight in the Earl of Mark and serve Earl Mark. However, Count John of Mark, who is also the Duke of Clever, usually lives in the Duchy of Clever and rarely comes to the Dukedom of Mark. Adler just wants to be appreciated, but he may not meet the monarch himself. The older he gets, the clearer Adler is that his younger brother Marin is much stronger than him. This strong refers to the mind, not the body in martial arts. In terms of martial arts, Adler can completely defeat Marin. But in terms of brains, 10 Adlers can't catch up with Marin. Adler had complained before, saying why he didn't inherit the wisdom of his mother, Lady Mary, like Marin, but only inherited his father's body, which seemed to be useless. Then, he was beaten up by the angry old Hoffman. Of course, although Adler is not smart, he is not a fool. Although his wife Liv is also careless and has no scheming, her father-in-law Knight Hamler is not stupid. As an old knight who has lived for decades, Knight Hamler always warns Adler every time he visits his daughter to be more respectful to his younger brother Marin in the future. After all, Marin is the monarch and Adler is the minister. Over the years, Adler has remembered this. So, along the way, although the 2 brothers rode side by side and talked and laughed, Adler became much more respectful. Even when riding side by side, he lagged behind Marin a little. Marin also noticed this keenly, but didn't say anything. It's not easy for him to speak up about this kind of thing, it's best to let it go. Now that the eldest brother has realized it himself, he is also happy to see it happen. In the future, there will always be a difference between the monarch and the minister. The eldest brother could realize it early, so he didn't have to hint and remind him. The distance between Oldenburg and Aurich is not far. The next day, the army arrived at the east gate of Aurich. Here, Angela, as the hostess, took the lead in person, opened the city gate, and welcomed Marin's triumphant return. Standing next to Angela were the old Hoffman couple and Geoffrey, the Prime Minister of East Frisia. Everyone's face was beaming with joy. As Marin's family and subordinates, Marin was good, and they naturally followed suit. If Marin lost the war, they might also be unlucky. Therefore, the happiness and laughter on their faces were real and natural. In addition, the families of the officers under his command came to greet Marin and the soldiers. When their husbands or sons were away on the battlefield, their relatives were the most worried. They crowded at the gate of the city, stretched their necks to look, hoping to see the figure of their husbands or sons jumping around. And what they feared most was the bad news that their husbands or sons were killed in battle. Fortunately, Marin's expedition ended in a complete victory. Although there were thousands of casualties in total, most people survived with advanced medical means, and in the end less than 1,000 people died. Of course, the deaths were mainly ordinary soldiers, and the officers basically survived, except for one company captain whose left arm was disabled and had to retire in the future. And the families who are qualified to stand at the gate of the city to greet today are naturally the families of the officers. Except for the family of the captain with a disabled left arm, who was crying and sad, everyone else was smiling. You know, in this war-torn era, it is really not easy to fight many battles and survive. Therefore, mercenaries also like to follow the ever-victorious general and like to win battles. Because winning a battle means a greater chance of survival. And what mercenaries are most reluctant to fight is the most severe city attack and defense war. That kind of battle is basically to fill with life. Of course, although the soldiers under Marin served under Marin in the name of mercenaries in the early days. However, it is obvious that Marin trained them as regular troops and raised them as regular troops. Moreover, many people's families were brought to East Frisia. So, they were all mercenaries at first, but now they have become regular troops under Marin. As soldiers under Marin, their families live very well under Marin's rule. Not to mention the officers, in addition to salary and benefits, there are also some farms allocated. With the fertilizer supply from Marin, although there are not many fields in the farm, the output is rich, so that the officers' families can live a comfortable life in this era. As for ordinary soldiers, if they bring their families to East Frisia, Marin will also arrange the families of those soldiers to live in the manor under his name. Although the identity is still serfs, they have the identity of military dependents, and their status is very different from that of ordinary serfs. What is the difference? The treatment given by ordinary serfs in the manor is to feed them and distribute a small amount of clothes, that is, enough food and clothes. Of course, this kind of treatment is already very good in the eyes of serfs in other countries. Many serfs in the German region can only eat half full. Being able to eat is definitely happiness. As for clothes, serfs must be wearing tattered clothes. But it is different in East Frisia. Marin's is more like a hired farm. As long as those serfs work hard, they can definitely feed their families. Moreover, they eat black bread. Although kohler bread is mixed with a small amount of straw chaff, the taste is not affected too much. At least, it is much better than the chewy black stick bread mixed with soil and stones. The treatment of ordinary serfs looks good. The families of active soldiers are treated better. As military dependents, the families of soldiers are eligible to receive a certain amount of salted fish for free from the manor manager during festivals. At the same time, every season, the whole family can get a set of clothes. Although simple, it is also envied by ordinary serfs. Because ordinary serfs only receive 2 or 3 sets of clothes every year. As for children's clothes, ordinary serf families basically use the clothes worn by adults to be modified and worn, and there are many patches. For military dependents, not only adults often have new clothes, but also children. Therefore, in ordinary manors, except for the children of the manager, the children of military dependents are the richest, they have new clothes to wear. In addition, Marin is also vigorously developing the cattle breeding industry in plans to engage in dairy cow breeding. If it reaches a certain scale, all children of military dependents will have milk supply. Of course, because there are still few white cows now, they can only supply the children of nobles. But with the development of dairy farming, it will be possible to supply the children of military families sooner or later. In addition, in civil disputes within the manor, the steward will obviously protect the military families. Unless the military families are really too much. Generally speaking, both parties are wrong in those civil disputes. In this case, the steward will directly stand on the side of the military families, making ordinary serfs envious and jealous. Of course, as a price, those soldiers need to work hard for Marin. This time, thousands of military families will lose their loved ones. However, the preferential treatment system for military families established by Marin is very complete. Those military families whose husbands or sons died in battle still enjoy the treatment of military families. Even better than ordinary military families. The dead, like the Chinese in later generations, are judged as martyrs, and their families are all treated preferentially. Children are also raised by the manor, and they are given priority in education opportunities. Therefore, in East Frisia, oh no, it should be called the Grand Duchy of the North Sea now, being a soldier is definitely a profession that ordinary serfs envy. Unfortunately, Marin has requirements for soldiers, those who are not brave are not allowed. Therefore, most people can only envy. But in fact, they were also the envy of serfs in other countries. Having enough food and warm clothes was definitely a paradise. Chapter 555, The Problem of Official Arrangement. Seeing Angela, who was still as beautiful as a flower, standing in front of him, and her son little Caesar jumping beside her, Marin's heart suddenly warmed up. After 11 years in this world, Marin has always been a little alienated from this world. Sometimes, he led troops to fight and participated in the struggle for hegemony among the princes, although it was very satisfying to win. However, Marin always felt that he was playing games, not real life. Only when he returned to Auric and returned to his wife and children, did Marin feel that he was a living person in this world, not a game player. This feeling, old Hoffman and Mrs. Mary, as well as brothers such as Adler, could not give. Maybe, in Marin's eyes, they are half NPCs. Marin jumped off the horse happily and walked towards Angela. Little Caesar beside Angela shook off Angela's hand, jumped to Marin, stretched out his pink little hand, and said, "Daddy, hug me." Well, it was German, but it was basically in that context. Marin immediately picked up little Caesar with a happy face, continued to move forward, came to Angela, and said gently, "I'm back." At this time, old Hoffman's face was a little embarrassed. He was a little face-saving, and thought that Marin would come to hug him first. As a result, Marin went to find his wife first. So, he coughed twice in dissatisfaction. Seeing the childish temper of old Hoffman, Marin smiled, handed Caesar to Angela, came to old Hoffman, opened his arms, and hugged the old man, which satisfied the old man's vanity. Then, old Hoffman really trembled, and his head was raised high, with an arrogant look, as if to say, "Look, this is my son, very promising." At this time, Prime Minister Geoffrey saw that Marin had finished greeting his relatives, and immediately raised his arms and shouted, "Welcome the Grand Duke to lead the army back in victory, long live the Grand Duke! Long live!" Seeing that the eldest among the officials took the lead, the officials who came to greet Marin naturally followed suit and shouted, "Long live the Grand Duke! Long live the Grand Duke!" Note, in Europe, long live does not refer specifically to the emperor, but a kind of cheer, similar to "Ura" in Russian. Or, in other words, the "long live" in Europe originally meant cheering, and it was translated into long live when translated into Chinese. Moreover, that was a matter of modern times, and long live also became a meaning of cheering, no longer referring specifically to the emperor. The family. Members of the officers and civilians around also shouted "long live," and Marin had to get back on his horse and waved to both sides. However, for the sake of caution, he did not take off his plate armor to prevent someone from taking advantage of the chaos to assassinate him. Amid the cheers of the crowd, Marin led a large number of officers into the city. Most of the army began to camp and settle on the spot outside the city. After all, the city of Auric is not very big, and it is too crowded for tens of thousands of people to enter the city. Therefore, Marin only brought officers into the city. As for the army outside the city, it was temporarily governed by the adjutants left by those officers and camped outside the city. In the evening, a grand triumphal dinner was held in the palace. Geoffrey personally served as the host. During the dinner, the old prime minister flattered Marin desperately and made him feel comfortable. Although he knew that the old man was flattering, Marin was still very comfortable. In fact, Marin knew what the old guy was thinking. He was thinking about being the prime minister of this grand duchy. Since the announcement of the integration of territory in Worms, the earldom of Oldenburg and the duchy of Schleswig no longer exist. Then, the positions of the two prime ministers Hayter and Mikkel will be cancelled. However, Mikkel and Hayter are not ordinary people. Hayter is not to mention. He is the first medieval college student to defect to Marin. He is well educated and now has some work experience. And Mikkel is even more complicated. He has been the Prime Minister of Denmark for more than 10 years. If a new Prime Minister is to be selected, Mikkel and Hayter are both very competitive. Therefore, Geoffrey felt tremendous pressure. There is only one Prime Minister of the Grand Duchy, he must work hard. Well, to curry favor with Marin. In fact, Marin had already planned it. Originally, Marin planned to appoint the most experienced Mikkel as the Prime Minister of the Grand Duchy. After all, he has managed a Kalmar alliance, so isn't a big deal for a Grand Duchy. However, later, Marin considered that there were many Danes in the newly incorporated Jutland Peninsula, and they needed powerful people to appease them. Moreover, the newly acquired territory of the Archbishop of Bremen also needed people to appease and stabilize it. Therefore, Marin decided to appoint Geoffrey and Mikkel as palace prime ministers, not prime ministers, at the same time. To this end, Marin set up two administrative palaces, the West Palace and the East Palace. The West Palace is the Royal Palace of Auric, which is the Western Administrative Palace, and the Palace Prime Minister is Geoffrey. The East Palace is the Administrative Palace in the East. The palace is located in the original Royal Palace of Schleswig City, and the Palace Minister is Mikkel. In terms of administrative level, Geoffrey and Mikkel are at the same level, both are palace ministers, but they are in charge of different areas. Geoffrey's West Palace is mainly responsible for East Frisia and the newly purchased West Frisia. Geoffrey himself is a Frisian, so it is naturally better for him to manage the Frisians. Mikkel is mainly responsible for managing the Duchy of Schleswig and the newly acquired northern part of the Jutland Peninsula. Mikkel is originally a Dane, so it is naturally more handy for him to be in charge of these places with a large number of Danes. Marin divided the area under his jurisdiction into multiple provinces. Among them, the county of East Frisia was changed to the province of East Frisia, with Emden as its capital, and Auric as its capital, which was listed separately as the capital district. West Frisia was changed to the province of West Frisia, with Groningen as its capital. The county of Oldenburg was changed to the province of Oldenburg, with the capital of Oldenburg City. The former Archbishopric of Bremen was changed to the province of Bremen, with Bremerford as its capital. The Duchy of Schleswig was changed to the province of Schleswig, with the capital of Schleswig City. The Jutland Peninsula area north of the Duchy of Schleswig was temporarily changed to the province of Jutland, and will be divided into two provinces in the future. As for the capital of Jutland, it is tentatively designated as Aalborg, and the Dithmarschen county, which originally belonged to the Principality of Holstein, is temporarily nominally assigned to the province of Schleswig, but still has autonomy. In addition, the former bishopric of Munster, Marin intends to divide it into two parts, the South Munster province, with the capital of Munster City, and the North Munster province, with the capital of Kloppenburg. The former bishopric of Osnabrück is changed to the province of Osnabrück, with the capital of Osnabrück City. In addition to letting Geoffrey be in charge of the provinces of East Frisia and West Frisia, and letting Mikkel be in charge of the provinces of Schleswig and Jutland, the rest of the province of Oldenburg will naturally be handed over to Heidel for continued management. And Heidel's identity has changed to the governor of Oldenburg. At the same time, the newly acquired province of Bremen is also managed by Heidel. Before, Heidel had managed Oldenburg very well and was on the right track. Therefore, Heidel can spend more time on the newly incorporated province of Bremen. As for the two provinces of Munster, the southern part cannot be managed for the time being, and can only be taken over after Bishop Conrad dies. Marin has not yet considered who will manage the province of North Munster. Similarly, Marin has not thought about who will manage the province of Osnabrück. After all, Marin's administrative talents are very scarce. How about sending Machiavelli to try? Suddenly, Marin remembered Machiavelli, who was serving as his administrative secretary. This guy is a political and diplomatic talent, so there is no need to waste him. Chapter 556, Sending Troops to West Frisia. The next day, Marin divided the territory into 9 provinces, including East Frisia, West Frisia, Oldenburg, Bremen, Schleswig, Jutland, South Munster, North Munster, and Osnabrück, and released it as a document. However, what embarrassed Marin was that he suddenly found that West Frisia seemed to have not been obtained yet. So, Marin, who had only rested for a few days, ordered the army to regroup. Then, 20,000 troops were selected, 1 man and 2 horses, ready to march to West Frisia. Of course, Marin was not willing to fight this tough battle. Because he was sure to win, why should he fight hard? Now the Duchy of Guedes is short of troops. Since the Swiss mercenaries left, there are only about 7,000 troops left in the Duchy of Guedes. According to intelligence, the 7,000 Guedes troops are divided into 2 parts. 3,000 of them are stationed in Groningen to guard this Hanseatic commercial city that can bring a lot of tax revenue. The remaining 4,000 people were guarding more than 10,000 prisoners of war captured by the army of the Duchy of Saxony, and were engaged in large-scale reclamation in West Frisia, preparing to open up a large amount of farmland. West Frisia has a large population of about 200,000 people, which is a place with a large population. In addition, the area is not small, and it has always been coveted by people. However, with the wars in recent years, the population of West Frisia has declined, and it has lost 30,000 to 40,000 people. Some escaped, some starved to death, and the labor force has been reduced a lot. Now the people of Guedes have more than 10,000 Saxon prisoners of war in their hands, and they originally wanted to exchange them for money. Unfortunately, George, the poor guy, can no longer afford to redeem people. Even if he can come up with money, it will probably take many years. However, these prisoners of war cannot be kept for nothing. Even if they are given the worst food, the rations of tens of thousands of prisoners of war are also a huge expense. Therefore, Duke Charles II of Guedes decided to learn from Marin and pull the prisoners over to reclaim wasteland and open up new farmland for Charles II. Or, use some of the newly reclaimed farmland to reward his soldiers. In this way, over the past 6 months, these more than 10,000 Saxon prisoners of war have helped Charles II, Duke of Guedes, to reclaim 10,000 ugrams of arable land in the western part of West Frisia. Even some of the arable land has been planted with food, waiting for the autumn harvest in October. Among the 7,000 garrisons stationed in West Frisia, 4,000 of them are escorting the Saxon prisoners of war to the western part of West Frisia to reclaim wasteland. All this information was reported back by the spies arranged by Koch in West Frisia. Marin had long coveted West Frisia, so he naturally sent people there to collect intelligence. Therefore, Marin now knows very well where the enemy is. Moreover, this occupation of West Frisia is actually just one of the characters. Another task is also very important, that is, to help George recapture the more than 10,000 Saxon prisoners of war. Therefore, the 20,000 troops sent to West Frisia were divided into 2 groups. One group of 6,000 people surrounded Groningen, the other group of 14,000 people went straight to the west of West Frisia, surrounded the 4,000 troops of Guedes and the more than 10,000 prisoners of war. Of course, Marin did not intend to fight this time. The 20,000 troops were sent just to scare the Guedes people and force them to hand over the land. In addition, if the military action was really used, the Guedes army, which was forced into a hurry, would probably kill the prisoners to vent their anger. At that time, his promise to help George solve the problem of prisoners of war would be in vain. Therefore, this time, Marin planned to use the method of military intimidation as the main method and negotiation as the auxiliary method to solve the problem of West Frisia. First of all, Marin must send a large army, and send a superior force that makes the Guedes people feel desperate, so that they can't think of resisting. In this way, forcing them to hand over West Frisia will not be a big problem. Secondly, the problem of prisoners of war is also an important issue. According to European custom, prisoners of war are eligible to be redeemed. However, if the defeated cannot pay the ransom, the victor is eligible to deal with the prisoners of war. The nobles are better. If they think it is a waste of food, it is still okay to kill a group of civilian prisoners of war. After all, those prisoners of war who were born as serfs are not considered individuals in the eyes of the nobles. But the problem is that when George was defeated for the second time, most of his army was sponsored by his allies, including the 4,000 Dutch warriors lent to him by Emperor Maximilian I. He must redeem these troops, including those civilian soldiers. Otherwise, he can't explain to his allies. Therefore, Marin must get this batch of prisoners of war intact and return them to George. Otherwise, even if Marin did not complete the agreement on the transaction between the two parties, he might be considered to have failed to purchase West Frisia. Therefore, for safety reasons, Marin did not intend to fight with the Guides' army at this time to prevent them from jumping off the wall and killing Saxon prisoners of war on a large scale. Moreover, Marin had long planned to send troops to the mainland of the Principality of Gedici after finding evidence that the Gedici people colluded with France. Therefore, there was no need to start a war with the Gedici people too early. Therefore, Marin's method was to rely on the strong combat effectiveness of the army on the one hand to intimidate the Gedici people and force them to voluntarily give up West Frisia, on the other hand, to buy the more than 10,000 Saxon prisoners of war at a lower price. As long as Marin paid, the Duke of Gedici would not be so angry as to kill the prisoners to vent his anger. After all, money is money. For the more than 10,000 prisoners of war, Marin planned to offer 300,000 gold coins. In fact, it was 250,000 gold coins sold to the emperor for second-hand weapons, plus a fraction of 50,000 gold coins. This price may not be comparable to the actual value of more than 1 million gold coins. However, it is also a huge sum of money. Whether to hand over the more than 10,000 Saxon prisoners of war in exchange for the 300,000 gold coins, or to kill the prisoners to vent anger, I believe that the cunning Duke of Guides, Charles II, still knows how to choose. Of course, in order to prevent accidents, the main thing is to prevent the Guides people from transferring prisoners of war. Therefore, Marin specially dispatched 14,000 main forces, 1 man and 2 horses, to rush to the western plains of West Frisia to block the way for the Guides people to go south. The reason for doing this is that the Guides' army, which supervises the more than 10,000 Saxon prisoners of war, will decisively take the prisoners south after learning that Groningen has been attacked. If they bring those prisoners back to the territory of the Principality of Guides, Marin will really not be a favor to pursue. After all, he will have to pretend to be a dove of peace for a long time, and try not to make trouble if he can. Moreover, if there is no war, it can also fully confuse the Principality of Guides and make them think it is safe. After that, it will be easier for Marin to raid the Principality of Guides after finding evidence. Spend some money today to redeem the prisoners of war safely. When the evidence of Guides' treason is truly discovered, then capture Guides, and the loss can be completely recovered, and even more can be obtained. This time, in addition to intimidating the opponent, the purpose of sending troops is to prevent the enemy from killing or transferring the Saxon prisoners of war. Then, spend a small amount of money to redeem all the prisoners of war. In this way, he not only occupied West Frisia, but also fulfilled his promise to recapture the more than 10,000 Saxon prisoners of war. Therefore, while excluding the entry of 20,000 troops into West Frisia, Marin also sent a letter to Charles II, Duke of Guides, in the Duchy of Guides, first telling the other party that he had sent 20,000 troops into West Frisia, and then strongly proposed to use 300,000 gold coins to purchase the prisoners of war worth more than 1 million gold coins. Under the coercion of his own army, I believe that Charles II, Duke of Guides, still knows how to choose. Chapter 557, Another Autumn Harvest. As expected by Marin, after receiving Marin's threatening letter, Charles II, Duke of Guides, was furious at Marin's behavior of picking peaches, and wanted to chop Marin with a knife. However, in the end, Charles II calmed down and chose to surrender. Why? Because at this time, the Duchy of Guides was simply unable to compete with Marin. At present, the army of the Duchy of Guides, the local and West Frisian army combined, is only more than 10,000 people, which is completely incomparable to Marin's 40,000 troops. Moreover, in terms of combat effectiveness, Marin's army defeated the 50,000 elite Bossa coalition with 20,000 Swiss mercenaries. Although the army of the Duchy of Guides also took the route of Swiss mercenaries, its combat effectiveness was still not as good as that of Swiss mercenaries. Therefore, they were simply unable to compete with Marin's army. Therefore, giving up West Frisian is inevitable. Even if Charles II doesn't want to give it, Marin can still take it down. Instead of this, it is better to withdraw his own 7,000 troops and preserve his strength. For the more than 10,000 Saxon prisoners of war, Marin offered 300,000 gold coins, which was obviously far below the actual value. However, Charles II, Duke of Guides, could not refuse. Because, while Marin was writing to him, he had sent troops to advance westward rapidly and occupied the southwestern border of West Frisia, blocking the southward road of the 4,000 Guides troops and more than 10,000 Saxon prisoners of war who were reclaiming wasteland in the west of West Frisia. Even if the Duchy of Guides wanted to transfer the prisoners back to the country, the retreat was cut off by Marin's army. Moreover, Charles II did not dare to order the killing of prisoners. Not to mention that this was against the rules, it was also easy to arouse Marin's anger. The 20,000 troops entering West Frisia were not vegetarians. If they were angered, the 7,000 Guides soldiers staying in West Frisia would have no way to survive. After thinking again and again, Charles II could only choose to swallow his anger and withdraw his men first. In any case, he could barely get back 300,000 gold coins. If he started fighting, he would have nothing, and maybe Marin would take advantage of the situation to invade his homeland. Therefore, Charles II was very reluctant to accept the conditions proposed by Marin, and decided to give up West Frisia and hand over the more than 10,000 Saxon prisoners of war to Marin in exchange for a low ransom of 300,000 gold coins. Before the start of the autumn harvest in October, the two sides completed the final deal. 7,000 troops of the Guides army evacuated West Frisia and handed over more than 10,000 Saxon prisoners of war. And Marin, as promised, paid a ransom of 300,000 gold coins to the other party. Next, Marin turned his attention to the autumn harvest. In fact, the arable land in East Frisia, because of the use of potash fertilizers, the growth of crops accelerated, and the autumn harvest began in mid-September. However, except for the farms in East Frisia and the previously controlled Oldenburg, Schleswig Duchy and North Munster, most of the farmland in West Frisia, Bremen and Jutland that Marin had newly acquired did not start the autumn harvest until October. Therefore, the autumn harvest will be busy for a long time. Moreover, what makes Marin extremely excited is that the newly acquired West Frisia, Bremen and Jutland will provide him with a large amount of farmland. There are nearly 100,000 ugrams of arable land in West Frisia, plus the 110,000 ugrams of arable land reclaimed by Duke Charles II of Guides using more than 10,000 Saxon prisoners of war, totaling nearly 110,000 ugrams of arable land. Moreover, most of these arable lands are ownerless. Why? Because the 8 barons of West Frisia were basically killed. Most of the knights under the 8 barons were also killed. Therefore, most of the 110,000 ugrams of land are now ownerless. Originally, these were occupied by Duke Charles II of Guides and his men. However, after the people of the Principality of Guides withdrew from West Frisia, these lands basically fell into Marin's hands. According to statistics, of the 110,000 ugrams of land, except for more than 10,000 ugrams that belong to the church and cannot be moved, the remaining nearly 100,000 ugrams of land have been seized by the Guides people for 80,000 ugrams. But now, all the 80,000 ugrams of arable land belong to Marin. Of course, Marin did not take all of these lands for himself. Because he also wanted to reward meritorious soldiers with part of the land as a military merit. However, because Marin robbed too much land this time, he only needed to divide a small part to complete the reward. The remaining big head still belongs to Marin. The situation in Jutland is similar to that in West Frisia. According to the agreement, King Hans of Denmark took away 600 or 700 local nobles. Therefore, about 90,000 ugrams of land on 20,000 square kilometers of land in Jutland also belonged to Marin. Although the land area of Jutland Peninsula is vast, the Danes have a tradition of developing animal husbandry. On such a large land, there are only 90,000 ugrams of arable land, which is not as good as West Frisia, which is only more than 5,000 square kilometers. However, there are many pastures on the Jutland Peninsula, which are very suitable for grazing. The most important thing is that, except for the tens of thousands of ugrams of land belonging to the church, which cannot be moved, the rest of the land in the Jutland region belongs to Marin. As for the Bremen province, the situation here is a little more complicated. Although Archbishop John Rod Val of Bremen accepted the land exchange plan for the sake of interests and took away all the people of the Val family, because they could occupy better and more land in the Stendal area. The other bishops of the Archbishop of Bremen who accompanied him also took away many clansmen, leaving a lot of unowned arable land. However, of the more than 60,000 ugrams of arable land in the Archbishop of Bremen, there were only 30,000 ugrams of unowned arable land in the end. Why? Because Archbishop John Rod Val took away only the main high-level officials of the Archbishop of Bremen, and did not take away all the priests. Most of the middle and low-level priests still stayed in the Bremen area. These people and their families behind them, as well as the church, occupied the remaining more than 30,000 ugrams of arable land. For these people, Marin is not easy to move. Moreover, it is very good to get half of the arable land. Fortunately, the Archbishopric of Bremen has a large area and there is still a lot of land that has not been reclaimed. As long as Marin can recruit enough people, there is a lot of land to be reclaimed in the Bremen province, which covers an area of 6,000 square kilometers. In addition to the high cost of developing those swamps, the reclamation of other wastelands is relatively convenient, as long as you have labor. This may be a problem for other princes, but Marin can spend a lot of money to recruit poor people and refugees in the south. Although it costs a lot to bring those refugees to his own territory, Marin is least afraid of spending money. After these people came, they farmed for Marin. Because of advanced agricultural technology and fertilizers, they could quickly bring more profits to Marin. In order to ensure the smooth autumn harvest, Marin sent most of the troops to the fields to help harvest rye, leaving only a few thousand elites to ensure safety. After all, in this year, rye harvesting is done manually with sickles, and the efficiency is very slow. If the harvesting speed is too slow and it happens to rain, then it will be bad luck, the wheat may rot in the field. Therefore, every autumn harvest, there is a word, rush harvest, which means to harvest the grain before the weather changes. Otherwise, if it rains, the wheat will rot in the field, and the loss will be great. Chapter 558, Colonies also have a good harvest. Before the Industrial Revolution, the autumn harvest was so important that it was almost the lifeblood of a country's economy. Failure to harvest the autumn harvest could lead to famine and political instability. Therefore, for the sake of the autumn harvest, Marin sent most of his soldiers to participate in the autumn harvest. Only tens of thousands of prisoners of war in South Munster did not participate in the autumn harvest. Because digging a canal connecting the Rhine River is no less important than the autumn harvest. In this era of backward transportation, roads and rivers are also important ways to expand power. In China in the 19th century, the British used warships through the Yangtze River, an important waterway, to reach into the Yangtze River basin. The Russians, on the other hand, reached out from distant Europe to the northeast through the world-famous Siberian Railway. However, the Siberian Railway was opened too late, not until 1916, and the Tsarist Russia was finished in 1917. But this railway also brought convenience to the later Soviet Union. Therefore, in 1905, the Tsarist Russians suffered a disastrous defeat in the northeast, while the Soviet Union won the Battle of Namenhen. It's not that the Soviet army is so powerful. In fact, the Soviet army suffered more casualties than the Japanese army. It's just that because there is the Siberian Railway and there are so many Soviet people, they don't care about casualties. So, the devils decisively chose to admit defeat. Moreover, Stalin later supported the establishment of Outer Mongolia and was unwilling to return it to China because Outer Mongolia is close to the Siberian Railway. As long as the Siberian Railway is cut off, the Soviet Union will completely lose control of the Far East. What is the Outer Shingan Range? It has nothing to do with the Soviet Union. This is why in later generations, the polar bear King Putin still attaches importance to Outer Mongolia and sheds crocodile tears in Outer Mongolia. If China really wants to seize the Outer Shingan Range, it must first get Outer Mongolia and can cut off the Siberian Railway at any time. Of course, that is unlikely. Later generations are already in the nuclear age. If you want to grab so much territory from the Russians, you have to eat nuclear bombs. Such an assumption is based on the premise of conventional war. If we put aside the factor of nuclear weapons, as long as China seizes Outer Mongolia and cuts off the Trans-Siberian Railway, the Russians will lose control of the Far East. I've gone too far. The above paragraph only shows the importance of transportation. If Marin wants to reach out to the Ruhr area, he must open up the transportation line to the Ruhr area. And water transportation is the most suitable at present. Although the Rhine is an important river in Germany, it has a fatal flaw: its estuary is in the Netherlands. As long as the Dutch block the estuary, inland shipping will collapse. Therefore, in later generations, the Germans built many canals, such as the Sino-German Canal, the Dortmund-Ems Canal. Of course, the Kiel Canal is indispensable. This pile of canals connects the northern plains of Germany and connects to the sea, facilitating the transportation of important industrial strategic resources such as coal and iron ore. Moreover, even in later generations, the cost of canal transportation is still lower than that of railway transportation, and it is the preferred transportation mode for bulk cheap goods. The Munster Canal that Marin is building now is actually a simplified version of the Dortmund EMS Canal in later generations. The main reason is that the distance is shortened and the river channel is a little narrower. However, their functions are similar, that is, connecting the Rhine and the EMS River directly to the North Sea. The main function of the Sino-German Canal is to connect the EMS River, the Weser River and the Elbe River horizontally to form a three-dimensional waterway transportation network. It can be said that as long as the Munster Canal is dug, Marin can reach out to the banks of the Rhine and make Emden the outlet for merchant ships on the Rhine. In this way, it is difficult for Emden's economy not to take off. It is precisely in view of this that at such an important moment as the autumn harvest, Marin did not stop digging the Munster Canal. At most, the construction army was not allowed to affect the autumn harvest in the southern Munster area. Because of the busy autumn harvest, the merits and rewards of Marin's soldiers were not counted and distributed in time. It will not be until the end of the autumn harvest that the statistics of military exploits and the final rewards will be resumed. Because of the autumn harvest, the armed conflicts of various countries have been suspended. Why? Although the armies of various countries are mainly mercenaries, they do not necessarily need to participate in the autumn harvest. However, the civilians who serve those mercenaries must participate in the autumn harvest. Otherwise, there will be a shortage of labor. Delaying the autumn harvest will be a big blow to any country. Only a commercial country like Venice will not pay much attention to the autumn harvest. Because the citizens of this country are basically businessmen or sailors serving businessmen, and very few of them grow crops. The same is true for Lübeck and Hamburg, they are Hanseatic cities. It's just that after they got the Duchy of Holstein in the last war, they had a large amount of farmland under their rule. But what made Marin speechless was that although Lübeck and Hamburg divided the Duchy of Holstein, the two cities focused on several cities in the Duchy of Holstein. They made great efforts to develop the several cities in their hands into prosperous commercial cities. But for the vast rural areas, the two Hanseatic cities turned a blind eye. Anyway, the manors in the countryside cannot collect taxes. The two Hanseatic cities of Lübeck and Hamburg simply let the manor owners in the countryside conduct parliamentary self-government and not come to the city to make plans. This autumn, not only the mainland is doing a big autumn harvest, but Marin's colonies in the Americas are also doing a big autumn harvest. Moreover, due to the low latitude, the autumn harvest in the Americas is earlier than that in mainland Europe. Especially Grenada, because it is in the tropics, it has actually been harvested a long time ago. That's not right. Because Grenada is a tropical island, there is no concept of spring, summer, autumn and winter, and there is no concept of autumn harvest. They harvest when the time comes, regardless of spring, summer, autumn and winter. In fact, as early as spring, Grenada sent a ship to transport back a ship of ginger and sugarcane, and another ship of rice. It's just that Marin had already led his troops to war at that time, so he didn't receive this filial piety. While the mainland was harvesting in autumn, Grenada harvested another crop of ginger and sugarcane, and sent back a ship of ginger and sugarcane. This time, Marin happened to receive this filial tribute, and he was naturally very happy. You know, in these years, because the Indian route had just been opened, and the scale of sugarcane cultivation in Portugal and Spain was still small. Therefore, the prices of ginger and sugarcane were very high. Moreover, ginger was actually considered a spice in this year, and its price was close to that of pepper. In the European market, although ginger was not as expensive as pepper at 10 shillings per pound, it was also 8 or 9 shillings per pound, it was 2 shillings per pound in the early Middle Ages, but with the rise of prices and the rise of Turkey, the price rose. After Portugal opened the Indian route, it began to fall again. Even in the period of Elizabeth I, the Indian route had been open for many years, ginger was still expensive, and ginger-flavored cakes were still high-end food in the court at that time. Originally, Marin was not very interested in the ginger and sugarcane on the ship. Especially the sugarcane, because there was no yellow mud method in China, it was made black, darker than brown sugar. Therefore, Marin had no interest in those black sugars, you can call it that, it seems that there was also black sugar in history. However, the child loves to eat. Little Caesar ignored Marin's warning and frequently stole brown sugar to eat. After eating, he licked his sticky fingers. Marin was furious and dragged little Caesar over to give him a spanking. He knew that eating sugar was bad for children's teeth. There was so much brown sugar at home. If this kid was allowed to steal sugar, it would definitely be bad for his teeth. Moreover, as a noble family, there was honey at home, but this kid still wanted to steal that kind of inferior brown sugar. It was like giving up white steamed buns to eat straw bran. However, what surprised Marin was that not only little Caesar liked to eat brown sugar, but also the children of nobles from other families liked it very much. Even those women liked to eat brown sugar very much. It seemed that brown sugar was a high-end thing. Marin finally woke up. He was used to white sugar in later generations and looked down on this kind of brown sugar, but in this era, the European bumpkins liked this kind of brown sugar with low purity and regarded it as a treasure. The current price of sugar in the market is more than 3 shillings per pound. Until later, when Spain planted sugarcane on a large scale in America, the price of sugar in Britain seemed to be 1 shilling and 6 pence per pound. The wholesale price for British merchants and Spaniards was 1 shilling per pound. In other words, this ship full of ginger and brown sugar are all high-end goods. Before, Marin was worried that he had no money to reward his soldiers. Rewarding them with war horses is no problem, but rewarding them with second-hand weapons and armor seems a bit unkind. So, Marin decided to learn from the means of celebrating the new year and festivals in later generations, and packaged the ginger and brown sugar in oil paper bags produced on Cape Breton Island as rewards, and give them to the soldiers as rewards with those second-hand weapons and armor. Chapter 559 Brown sugar is also a treasure. Marin didn't take the sucrose seriously, but Angela was distressed. That was her sugar. Half a ship of sucrose, almost 50 tons, or 110,000 pounds. Marin actually wanted to give it all away, which made her, the housekeeper, feel distressed. So that night, Marin was pinched by her and got a few blue spots on her body. Marin thought Angela liked to eat candy, so he quickly popularized science and said that eating too much candy would cause teeth to fall out, and the goddess would become a toothless female monster. In addition, it is easy to cause diabetes. Angela was really scared and dared not eat candy. But Marin told her that if she really wanted to eat sweets, she could eat honey. Honey is a monosaccharide, which is easily absorbed by the human body like glucose, and is converted into energy without causing deposition. Therefore, even diabetics can eat some honey appropriately. Of course, it is authentic honey. In later generations of China, due to food safety problems, the honey in many supermarkets is actually maltose. Therefore, it is not suitable for diabetics to eat, and problems will occur if they eat it. If it is authentic pure honey, there is no problem. Of course, you can't eat too much. However, for Europeans today, sugar is still a rare thing. Not to mention excessive consumption, even the nobles did not eat enough. Today's Europe is very similar to China before the reform and opening up. Most people are pale and thin, and lack nutrition. When seeing fat meat, everyone will like to eat it, just for the fat oil. In fact, the materials in Europe at this time were poorer than before China's reform and opening up. At least, in that era, Chinese people could buy white sugar with tickets. Although the amount was a little less, they ate more than European nobles at this time. Even European nobles had never seen white sugar, only brown sugar. Brown sugar was considered a high-end product from India. During this period, European sugar-making technology was still very backward, and they had not mastered the brown sugar technology, let alone white sugar. At this time in China, in Nannan, Fujian, it seems that the yellow mud method has appeared to produce white sugar. In addition, there is also rock sugar technology. Therefore, the European nobles of this period also lived a very hard life. Little Caesar, the son of the Grand Duke, couldn't help but eat brown sugar, let alone ordinary people. So Marin tried to share some of the brown sugar with his guards. As a result, the guards treated the brown sugar like a treasure. When someone ate brown sugar, some sugar grains stuck to their fingers, and they even wanted to suck their fingers in their mouths like little Caesar. Moreover, the expression on his face was very, as if he had sucked some poison. Marin was shocked and knew the weight of sucrose in the eyes of ordinary people in Europe at that time. You know, most of his guards came from knight families and were considered wealthy families. The children of these wealthy families loved sucrose so much, not to mention the civilians. So Marin decisively ordered the packaging bags of sucrose to be smaller. From the previous standard of 20 pounds per bag, it was changed to a 1-pound bag similar to the size of salt packaging bags in later generations. Of course, a beautiful appearance was also designed, which looks very tall and noble. Moreover, Marin also learned from the leaders of later generations and wrote the inscription himself, "Delicious Sucrose." In fact, when the oil paper bag was opened, there was only black granulated sugar inside, which looked like gunpowder powder. If the girls in the future opened the package and saw the stuff inside, they would probably throw it directly on Marin's face. But now, this is a high-end product. When Marin met Jerry, the chubby grandson of fat Prime Minister Geoffrey, he smiled and gave him a bag of granulated sugar. Then, the little fat Jerry immediately hugged it in his arms and refused to let go, and did not listen to his grandfather's reprimand, as if he was afraid that others would snatch it from him. If the parents of the future saw Marin's action, they might swing their fists to teach Marin a lesson, just use this rag to fool my baby. But here, Geoffrey expressed his gratitude for Marin's reward. It was real gratitude, not false gratitude. Then, this delicious sucrose quickly became a high-end product for the upper class of Auric, and it was in short supply. When they heard that Marin was going to use 110,000 pounds of delicious sugar cane to reward meritorious soldiers, the soldiers were very happy, but the nobles were not very happy. However, Geoffrey told the nobles that if you want it, you can buy it from the soldiers who have received the reward after the reward is over. As long as you pay a high price, those ordinary soldiers who are suffering will definitely sell it. In fact, this is just the 1.0 version of Marin's sugar cane sales. This kind of brown sugar is naturally the lowest grade sugar. When Marin sends someone to contact the Ming dynasty, he can hire highly skilled sugar craftsmen from Fujian at a high salary to guide his men in Cuba and Grenada to produce more advanced brown sugar and white sugar. Moreover, Marin had already planned it out. In the future, brown sugar will be sold to ordinary people, brown sugar will be sold to small nobles and wealthy families, and white sugar will be a confidential thing, a high-end product, specially used to sell to middle and high-level nobles, and even the royal family, and listed as a luxury product. Of course, the packaging will be different. For example, the oil paper bag used to package black sugar has the words, "Delicious Cane Sugar," written on it. The bag used to package brown sugar has not only the words but also exquisite patterns printed on it to distinguish it. As for white granulated sugar, it is even more amazing. Not only is it packaged in the most exquisite oil paper bag, but it is also packed in an exquisite wooden box outside the oil paper bag. Then, it is sold for 100 million. No, it is a very high price. At least, it should be higher than the price of pepper. In fact, Marin is not unaware that white sugar made from activated carbon is better. Moreover, Marin also knows some methods of making activated carbon, that is, using 500-degree high-temperature steam to impact the charcoal on the metal net, thinking that it creates pores and causes adsorption. However, it is very troublesome to make such equipment. Moreover, the production cost is also very high. In this era, the sucrose produced by the yellow mud method is already white enough and can be considered a high-end product. So Marin was too lazy to make activated carbon. The most important thing is that the yellow mud method is low-cost and can be mass-produced. This kind of black granulated sugar can be bought for 3 shillings a pound. If it is made into brown sugar, the price will definitely be higher. As for white sugar, Marin had already planned that the price must be more than 10 shillings per pound. Moreover, it is necessary to control sales and create a false impression of nobility to maintain a high price. At this time, Marin also reacted. It turned out that the housekeeper Angela was not distressed about the cane sugar, but because the cane sugar was also money. According to 3 shillings per pound, the 110,000 pounds of brown sugar are worth 330,000 shillings, equivalent to 66,000 gold coins. But Marin still insisted on giving this batch of brown sugar to the soldiers as prizes. Why? If gold coins were issued, no soldier would feel anything if he received 1 or 2 gold coins. However, receiving 1 or 2 bags of oil paper bags and brown sugar with his own inscriptions. This kind of rare thing is more attractive as a prize than giving money directly. This brown sugar worth 66,000 gold coins, if distributed, may have an effect that is more shocking than distributing 150,000 gold coins in cash. Moreover, this brown sugar is produced by Marin's sugarcane plantation in Granada. Apart from providing food, lodging and clothing to the serfs, there is basically no cost. In addition to the use of advanced agricultural technology and fertilizers, the sugarcane yield is quite high, resulting in lower production costs. In fact, the production cost of this brown sugar worth 66,000 gold coins, even including the freight, is estimated to be only about 5,000 to 6,000 gold coins. Even if it is not given to the soldiers as a prize, it must be sold. It is better to treat it as a prize and force it to be sold to the soldiers directly. In this way, not only can so much sugar be sold at once, but the soldiers can also be grateful. You see, the nobles in the country have not been able to enjoy this kind of sugar, but we have it, and the nobles have to ask us to buy it. I am proud. Chapter 560 Edward's request for help. As a time traveler, Marin naturally knows the difference between brown sugar and black sugar. The processing method of brown sugar is relatively primitive, that is, crush the sugarcane and boil the juice for several hours, then quickly pour it onto a flat surface to cool. After it is dry and hard, it is crushed to become brown sugar. The whole process is relatively primitive, without any additives, and it is relatively natural. Of course, the taste is also more mixed. Because some polyphenol in the sugar juice have not been removed. Therefore, it gives people a feeling that the taste is not very pure. In fact, this kind of not very pure brown sugar is the most nutritious. It's just that the appearance of brown sugar is a bit ugly. After all, it's black and the grade is very low at first glance. Moreover, it feels a bit sticky. When brown sugar is processed, some alkaline lime water is often added to neutralize the acidic substances of polyphenol in the sugar juice. As a result, the sweetness of the sugar looks more authentic, but it loses the caramel flavor of brown sugar and many nutritious substances. Of course, brown sugar contains a lot of calcium because it is added with lime water. In addition, there are also many iron ions. Iron ions replenish blood, which is why women drink brown sugar water after pain. As for white sugar, it is even purer, that is, pure sucrose. But in fact, white sugar is the least nutritious. It's like refined rice and coarse rice. Coarse rice is more nutritious, but the taste is bad, so it is the refined rice with no nutrition that is more popular. The same is true for sucrose. White sugar is the worst in nutrition. However, because it is crystal clear and looks great. Therefore, white sugar is often the most advanced. The most nutritious black sugar retains the purest original nutrition, but it is the lowest grade. Of course, Marin would not be stupid enough to point out that black sugar is better than white sugar. For him, it is in his interest to tout white sugar as the best sugar when others don't know the white sugar technology. In addition, although adding lime water destroys the nutritional components of sucrose, it can reduce the viscosity of sucrose, making it less likely for sucrose to stick together and easier to crystallize and granulate. Therefore, lime water is often added to sugar production. Even in the production of modern white sugar, lime or sulfurous acid is added to dissolve or neutralize impurities and improve purity. Marin suddenly remembered that Cuba's laterite nickel mines seem to produce a lot of sulfurous acid. The sugarcane producing area is also on the island of Cuba, but one is in the east and the other is in the west. Therefore, Marin can easily complete the deployment and transportation of sulfurous acid and make sugar by the sulfurous acid method. As for your comment that white sugar will become sour, this problem does not exist. Because sulfurous acid is an acid that is easy to volatilize. When removing water, the sulfurous acid will slowly evaporate as much water is removed, or simply react with some substances in the sugar juice. The remaining sucrose will naturally not contain much sulfate ions. After all, sulfite is very unstable. Marin thought beautifully about the good money prospects of Cuba's sugarcane planting and sugar industry, and it seemed that the future was bright. In fact, on the island of Cuba, Terra's colonization in Havana has not yet opened up the situation. After all, Terra is not a decisive person, nor is he good at coaxing and appeasing. Now, he has only built a castle in Havana and planted 2,000 acres of sugarcane, which is far less than the scale on Granada. Facts have proved that Marin's first few servants were not all talented. Terra may be qualified as a builder and developer. However, he seems to be unable to expand. Therefore, Marin made up his mind to arrange a more vicious person to assist him after the autumn harvest, and he must complete the expansion of Cuba. Otherwise, the flat terrain and fertile soil of Cuba will be wasted. Just as Marin was thinking about matters related to sugarcane and Cuba, Edward of the York family was also thinking about important issues in the temporary royal palace in Dublin. He had already received the letter from his sister, Princess Margaret. Then, Edward also asked the representative of the North Sea Chamber of Commerce from the side, but the representative of the North Sea Chamber of Commerce in Dublin did not answer the question directly, but talked about it. So Edward believed in his sister's judgment more. Moreover, Sister Margaret's judgment is not unreasonable. Edward is very clear about the Tara mine. After all, Tara Hill is just northwest of Dublin, not very far away. At the beginning, the North Sea Chamber of Commerce dug a deep mine at Tara Mine, which was quite a big deal. But in the end, the North Sea Chamber of Commerce's mine at Tara Hill seemed to have failed, as if the mine was too deep, resulting in a lot of water seepage. In addition, the North Sea Chamber of Commerce's request for Edward to obtain Newcastle and nearby areas after winning also confused Edward at the beginning. However, after seeing his sister's letter this time, Edward seemed to understand that the other party seemed to be very interested in Newcastle's coal mines. At the beginning, Edward promised to let the president of the North Sea Chamber of Commerce Edison become the Earl of Newcastle after the victory. However, Sister Margaret's opinion was more straightforward: just give the entire Northumberland county in the northeast of England to Marin. If Marin is really the behind-the-scenes president of the North Sea Chamber of Commerce, there is nothing wrong with doing so. Moreover, Princess Margaret also said that if the entire Northumberland was assigned to Marin, then Marin would face the threat of the Kingdom of Scotland and become a protective barrier in the north of England. Edward was very interested in this statement. Although Scotland is Edward's ally now, Edward also knows that Scotland just doesn't want England to be strong and stable. Before Henry VII defeated Richard III and became King of England, France and Scotland also supported Henry VII. So, France and Scotland simply support opponents of England, rather than supporting a monarch or dynasty. Once Edward conquers England and becomes the new King of England, France and Scotland may change their faces and support their opponents. Their purpose is nothing more than to plunge England into eternal chaos. Edward had heard of this Marin Hoffman a long time ago. After all, the disastrous defeat of Charles VIII was known to all of Europe. And that Marin Hoffman seemed to have become famous by defeating King Charles VIII of France, and suddenly became a lord from an ordinary knight. Later, this guy became the Count of East Frisia, led an army of 10,000, and defeated Albrecht, the Duke of Saxony, who led an army of more than 20,000. That's not all. During this period, he also led an army of 40,000 to defeat the 50,000 troops of the Bosse coalition, including 20,000 elite Swiss mercenaries, and 20,000 Danish troops. Therefore, in terms of combat effectiveness and military strength, this person is definitely a god of war in Europe. If he could win over this person to help him fight Henry VII, it seems that the success rate is very high. So Edward's heart became hot. According to his sister's wishes, he wrote a secret letter and handed it to the representative of the North Sea Chamber of Commerce in Dublin, hoping to give it to the mysterious Mr. Edison. In the letter, Edward told Mr. Edison that if he was Mr. Marin Hoffman, he would be willing to use the entire Northumberland county, including Newcastle, as a fiefdom, and ask him to send troops to help him defeat Henry VII and regain the throne belonging to the York family. Of course, Newcastle and Northumberland county are just basic conditions. If Mr. Edison has other conditions, he can also mention them. Even if Mr. Edison is not Marin Hoffman, as long as he can persuade Marin Hoffman to send troops to help him regain the throne, the conditions will remain unchanged.